Hey, how's everyone doing? Let's see. Things are chiming. Close. Cool. Okay. What are we getting ourselves into today? We're going to do, I think what we're going to do is end up making a lot of web pages. However, they're going to be kind of plain looking, meaning they're not going to have a bunch of text and images on them. But we're working on, I'm on the wrong week 6. And we get into web page layouts. And you see there's a ton of resources on here, which you definitely need to be checking out. Definitely a bunch of resources. And then participation 6A and 6B kind of go together. And we're going to work on these as a group. But basically, each of these links to the same PDF file. And what this is a collection of just generic web page layouts. And we're not going to do all of these together, but I don't see why we can't handle at least 6 of them today, and maybe 6 of them on Thursday. And you'll see once you get that many done, you'll start to feel like, okay, I've got a handle on this. And if you can create 12 of these, I bet you could create the others. How many are on there? About 18 in total. Yeah, so yeah, even if you could just do 9, 10, or 11 of them, I think you'd have a handle on how to create them. So yeah, and once we can see how some of these pages start, obviously, if we do the first one, which we probably will do, it's probably not much to do the second, the third, or the fourth. So what I am going to do, I'm going to take this PDF and I'm going to drag it to another display so I can see it. I'll maximize that. And my intention is I'm going to hide my screen momentarily, and then I'm going to put up a layout, one of the layouts on that sheet, and then I'm going to ask you to kind of catch up to me and make it yourself. And then I'll talk about what we do and stuff like that. For some of the trickier ones, I'll work on them with you as you type. Either way, you're going to have them all done, or at least the ones that we do in class. Before we do that, we're going to make one page, which is going to be kind of like a directory to all of our layout pages. So I'm going to head over to my code editor. And let's see, I will just drag that over there. I got a bunch of stuff on here. So let me just close things, kind of clean up a little bit. Ooh, I got a little HTML file. You know what I think? I'm going to cheat a little bit today here. And I'm going to do a file save as. Let's see, this is going into my 195 folder. That looks good. And I'm going to call this web layouts.html. I'm just going to do a little bit of updating. Speaking of title tags, I was reading an article over the weekend about what Google is doing with title tags in the search engine results. And they've changed quite a bit in the past 6 months. It used to be the title tag is what was used in the search engine result page. And if you don't have a title tag, it would grab some other text. But lately, in the past few months, Google has been experimenting with a new program in which they will rewrite title tags that display on the web page or on the search engine result pages, even if you have a title. So my advice is, especially outside of class, is to create web pages with very good descriptive titles. But that doesn't mean that Google won't necessarily rewrite it. Now, I had a couple of examples of where Google has done this, and they weren't necessarily crazy, but where it was impacting the most was on news websites. News websites will have a story, an article, and that article title is often the title of the web page for that article. And if you change just a couple of words in the title of an article, it can have a pretty big impact on the meaning of that article. So nothing for us to really be concerned about, but kind of interesting for business owners and their websites and the titles they use and what might show up in Google. Okay, let's see. I've got my web page layouts title up there. You know what we're going to do today too? I'm not going to use external styles. Instead, I'm going to use internal styles. And the reason I'm doing internal styles is because we're going to make a lot of web pages, and each of those pages is going to have styling for it. So instead of having one CSS, which controls half a dozen web pages, we're going to have half a dozen web pages, each controlled by their own CSS. Now, of course, you could still use external CSS for that, but I think internal styles will be a little bit more efficient. So that way, when you want to use your web pages as a resource, you can go right to that web page and view the source code, bring it up, and you're going to have the HTML for it, and you're going to have the CSS for it all in one convenient file. So I think as a study tool, as a reference for you, I think that's going to be a better way to go. Give myself a headline 1. Web page layouts. I'm going to delete a bunch of that. My description's no longer valid. There we go. Okay, I think I'm about ready to start up here. Got a generic page. I don't need to have that ID in my body tag. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Now I've got it saved as web layouts. In fact, I'm going to hit my go live button and let's see what happens. And there it is. There's my web page layout right there. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and do a little bit of basic styling. We're still going to have a reset rule. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a few basic styles here as well. In the body of my page. What do I want to do here? That's right. I was going to try this experiment here. I was going to try to get in the habit of doing my colors this way. See how that works. I think that'll work. Let's find out. Yep. Now I'm not getting my little color pop-up here because I'm using a new syntax, which VS Code is not quite aware of yet. I think I mentioned this in a previous class. So this is HSL, hue, saturation, and light, and it gives me that shade of blue. Now, if I want to reduce the saturation, it's that middle number right there, that middle 100%. I can change it to like 60% and makes that color muted, softer. I'm reducing the saturation. And I can make it darker. This is the light value here. The default is like 50%. If this number goes up, the color gets lighter. So if I did something like 80%, it would be a really light, let's think, there we go, really light blue. And if I go, obviously, with 20%, closer to 0, it's going to be really dark blue. I think I'll go around 30% there. So that's hue, saturation, and light. This last value, this number 1, that's the transparency, or the opacity, I should say. At 1, it's fully opaque. Opaque, again, means solid. You cannot see through an opaque object. If I reduce the opacity, then you would start to be able to see through it. Not going to play around with it because I don't have any, it's just a body background color and there's nothing to see behind it. But if I did do something like this, it would have an impact on how the color looks. I mean, if this was like a 0.2, it's very semi-transparent. It's very, I guess it is very semi-transparent. It sounds weird to say it that way, but it's so transparent that you see through the color and it totally looks like a different color. So you could use that as a color control though. So not a bad way to go. So 0.9 is almost 1. So now it's going to look kind of like it did before. I think I'm going to leave it at 0.9 for now. No. I'll put it at 1. I'm going to use this a few more times today, I think, just so we can get used to seeing this particular syntax. All right, I got that dark color. Now, what's kind of nice about something like this is when I use a syntax like HSL or RGB, it makes it easy to do what's called a monochromatic color scheme, basically different kind of shades of the same color. So if I did the same color, then my text, which is there, is the same color as the background. But now I can play around with some of these numbers just a little bit. I could put this to 80% light. And now I'm building what's called a monochromatic color scheme. And it makes it easy to make multiple shades of that same basic color. Okay, so I'm going to do that. A little space there just because I think it looks better. And good old font family. Verdana. Excellent. Okay, not too worried about some of the other stuff. I will do this on the H1. That's the line center and margin 24 pixels. I'm not going to use pixels too much today. I'm going to use ems more. I'll try to use ems more. 3 ems. Okay, feel pretty good about that. Okay, so I've got that title. Now this is going to be a directory page to multiple layouts. So what I'm going to do here is create a navigation menu. Is going to have this web page is going to have one navigation menu. And let's see, I'm going to do anchor href equals layout 1. Let's see. Now I'm going to copy this. Paste, 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 paste. I'm going to be a little overzealous here. I'm not going to do this many today, but I expect I'm going to end up using the same exact web page for Thursday. Let me just go through real quick and update these. Now for participation, I don't really care which ones we do. Obviously, we're working on this together, so you can do the same ones I do. But I'm also going under the intention that maybe some people will be completing this activity or these activities that aren't part of our class. And that's why this PDF is up there. So basically, they can look at the class recording, or they can just look at this PDF and say, all right, I'm going to start making some of these. And some people might focus their attention on, let's say, the easier 6, which are on this first page. Others might focus their attention on the more challenging 6, which are on the third page, or some might focus in the middle, or like us, we might just mix around and do different things. You can decide which ones you do. You can do the same ones as me, or you can do different ones. Let me put that back off to the side. And I also need to update my hrefs here, or my HTMLs. Excellent. Okay, so I've got a menu, a navigation menu of 10 hyperlinks. They're linking to web pages, which I haven't created yet. But basically, what I will probably be doing very, very soon is doing a file save as. I'll show you that process, though. So we're still kind of working together here. So far, nothing too fancy. I'm going to do a little bit of styling on this navigation menu. But that's how my page looks so far. I don't think I'm zoomed in at all. Yeah, let's go. Okay, there's 100%. I'm going to keep it at 100% today. And let me do some styling on that navigation. So for my navigation, where is it? Let's see. How about right up here? I'm going to take my nav and I'm going to make it a display flex. So I'm making my nav menu a flex parent. We are officially want to get a little bit smarter about creating CSS flexes, flex boxes. So I know I've used it a couple times in class and I've kind of glossed over it a lot, but I think today is the day. Once we get into web page layouts, especially once we want to do responsive layouts. By the way, it is a little unwritten goal of mine for today that all of the pages we do are going to be mobile friendly, all the layouts we do. So you're going to see me resizing browser windows a little bit more as well. So mobile-friendly web pages are on deck, even though our topic is basic web page layouts. So display flex is basically makes a Flexbox parent. Now, a Flexbox parent is a special kind of display flex, meaning the children inside can move around. You can have several that are side by side, but if there's not enough room for that, you can swap it so that they are vertically oriented. It's extremely useful. And Flexbox has only been around for a few years. And before that, to make mobile-friendly pages was a pain in the butt. It was not an easy task. We used a combinations of floating and positioning in order to create different looks for mobile. Flexbox really makes that process a lot easier. So I'm glad it's out there. It's been out for a few years now. It's got good support with all the modern browsers, so no risk of using it. So display flex. Now I'm going to come back to that. Nav is my parent. But now I'm going to say nav space A. The anchor tags that are within my nav, these are going to be the flex children. I've got a flex parent and I need flex children. And to really be able to see these, I'm going to do display block, not inline block, but display block. And I'm going to set their width to be 200 pixels and their height to be 140 pixels. And text align center, line height about 140 pixels. You know, I said I was going to not do pixels so much, but I meant for the big layout objects and margins. So I still like doing width and height measures in pixels and stuff. However, we could do, oh, is this going to be good? Yes, this will be neat. I'm changing my mind again. Oh, before we do much though, let me at least show you what these look like. And let me do this as well. Background color. Let's see, let's get my HSL. I'm going to do this one, but I'm going to make it semi-transparent. So we'll be able to see them. I'm going to do a margin of 1M. So you're going to be able to see those anchor tags right up there now. Look at that. So that's how quick and easy it is to make a big blocky horizontal navigation menu. So these are all hyperlinks. Go back to my markup here. First thing I want to make sure you've got is notice how simple the HTML is. Nothing fancy here. I've got an opening and closing set of nav tags, and then I just have a series of anchor tags inside of them. Nothing tricky. I'm not using any unordered list today, even though we could, but that adds a little bit more complexity that I don't want us to focus on today. So very simple HTML. Now for the CSS, a couple things going on. Especially important, of course, is display flex on the parent. Nav is a parent. The children are the anchor tags. I'm making my anchor tags, which are normally inline elements, into block elements. I'm giving them width and height. I'm going to alter these in just a moment. Text align center, you know what that does. I chose a line height equivalent to the height of the block. I told you what that did last week, I believe, and that kind of gives me vertical centering of that text. So I'm happy with that. Background color, cool. I'm happy with that. Margin gives me the space around. All right, pretty happy with that. Let me also do this too. That's decoration, none. Get rid of the underline. And I want a foreground color. I want my foreground color actually to be kind of yellowish. So, you know, I'll just do orange as an accent. That might look kind of neat. Actually, it doesn't look kind of neat. It's something dark. So I guess I will just do good old, actually, I guess I can still use my HSL, but I'll make it 1 for solid, hue, saturation, and light. So if my light value is a low number, it's going to be a very dark color. And in fact, it could be so dark. If that was a 0, it would be black, regardless of what these first two, the 200 or the 60% are. Hue, saturation, and light. There we go. I know you're saying, well, it looks just like you could have just done hashtag 222. You're right, I could have, and nobody would know the difference. But I'm going to try to use that same HSL over and over again, just to kind of beat you over the head with it, right? Okay, so pretty good. Now remember, none of these pages exist, so none of these hyperlinks will function. That's fine, but they will momentarily. So, okay, well, that's pretty nice, but what's the big deal about this Flexbox? Well, let's find out. What happens, oops, I didn't mean to do that, if my web page is narrower? Now look how messy this looks. My web page is narrower. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a window, and then that, and then this, window left. Oops, get back over here. Come on. There we go. So I've got my markup over here on the left. I know it's tough to see everything. That's okay. And now you can see my web page on a narrow interface. And on a narrow page, this doesn't look nearly as good. So I'm going to head back up to my CSS. In addition to display flex, I'm also going to do this. Justify content. No, that's not what I want to do. I do want to do that one, but not yet. I want to do flex flow row wrap. That's what I want to do. Okay, now this is a pretty interesting. Look how it changed that layout pretty dramatically here. So flex flow row wrap. Flex flow is actually a shorthand property. It's covering flex direction, and it's also covering something else I can't remember. But by putting in flex flow, I can put in these two values. I can put in row or column. So for instance, if I had a column there, notice how the layout of my anchor tags is all in a column. I could put, obviously what you saw before, the word row, which means it puts them all in a horizontal row, which is kind of what it was already at. However, I'm also throwing in the word wrap, which means if the browser is narrow, then my row of items is now going to wrap underneath so that they all fit. And of course, if my browser was wider, then more of them would fit. If my browser is narrower, then there we go. They kind of appear to be in a column. So, and this is really huge for web page layout, because now we have this flexible layout regardless of the device width. And if I was looking at this, let me maximize that. I'm going to Control-Shift-I. Actually, and I want to go to mobile. Let's see, hold on. Let me change my layout so it's there. Mobile. There we go. So that's a portrait-oriented tablet. And let's change this out to iPhone 678. Here we go. There's not enough width, so they all fit down there. And that is kind of what I want you to start to get used to, is how does your web page look, your web page layout look under different kind of devices. If you don't go to your mobile, by the way, this is just Control-Shift-I to bring up the console, and then I bring up the little mobile emulator. There's a keyboard shortcut for it. It might be Control-Shift-M. Let's find out. Control-Shift-M in your browser? Nope. Anybody know the keyboard shortcut for that? I think there's one that goes right to the mobile layout. Well, I usually just go to Control-Shift-I, and then I bring this up, and then go to the mobile friendly layout, and then you can change this out. You can also do responsive, and it gives you a little slide handle, so you can drag that and see how it looks. You get a very similar effect, though. Even if you're not using this, you can get a very similar effect just by resizing your browser window. Very, very similar. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Let's see, Windows right. Okay, so that's what that Flex Flow row wrap does. Now, in addition, justify content, and this is, I think, where I want to do center. There we go. So if I put justify content on that Flexbox parent, on that nav, it gives these a nice horizontal centering right there in the middle of the page. So how's everyone doing with that? So far, it's kind of new, kind of important, but hopefully not that complicated. I still think the most complicated thing I've done on here is these crazy colors with HSL. HTML is very, very simple. Flex parent. You'll use these so often that it's kind of just a habit. That's why I don't even know what the like wrap. I can't remember if it was like flex style or flex wrap maybe. Actually, I could probably find out, I suppose, if I start to type the word flex. Yeah, it's flex wrap. So flex flow is a combination of flex direction and flex wrap. I never use them individually though. I just always use the combined. There we go. Transparency outside of HSLA, so just A. Let's see. Not 100% following the question, but yeah, so this is one way to do the HSL. She's mentioning HSLA, which is a variation. So HSL, here, let me write it this way. No, I'll keep it. So what do I have? 260, 10, 1. So you can also do HSLA 200. I already forgot my numbers. 60%, comma, 80%, comma, 1, something like that. So if you do HSLA, you separate these values with commas. If you do HSL, you're separating them with spaces. And then the last one, which is the transparency, you just put a slash. This is the one I kind of know, the HSL or HSLA. I literally just learned about this shorthand HSL model like 6 days ago, like on last Thursday, I think I read about it right before class and I wanted to try it. So now you can also do Rgba. That's another format. So for instance, this color, if I knew the numbers, I could do Rgba, which is going to be 3 values like 44, 120, comma, let's say 230, comma, and then 0.8. So Rgba is 0 to 255 for each of these values, but that would create a semi-transparent color. Separate one for only the last value as opposed to doing both at heaven. Oh, can you just do the color transparency in one declaration? No, you cannot. The short answer is no. At least not that I know of, and I'm pretty sure there's not. I was just reading up on colors. Actually, I was listening up on colors on a podcast, and I feel certain if there was a way to do that, they would have mentioned it. And I've never seen it being done. So it's only with that Rgba or HSLA, basically. Okay, now I've changed my colors quite a bit. So let me just go ahead and Control Z a little bit and see if I can get back to where I was. There we go. Cool. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about this. I'm happy with my layout. We've got a little Flexbox going on. So now we're going to do the very scary part. And that's basically this. Let me maximize my code. I think that's what, Windows up arrow, Windows up. I thought it was. Windows down. There we go. So Windows key up arrow, you toggle that, you can maximize that window. Okay, so here's the scary part. I think we're done with this page. Not done, but pretty done with it, right? We just need to remember that all of our layout pages have this very simple file name, layout 1, layout 2, layout 3, layout 4, and so forth, okay? So what we're going to do next is I'm going to go to this page and file, save as, and this is still in my right folder. That's good. I'm going to call it layout1.html. Okay, layout1.html. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean up a bunch of stuff in here. None of these pages is going to have any text, so there's no need for headlines or nav or anything like that. So I'm on my layout 1 page. I may not remember to do this, but I'll just do that. And then I'm going to get rid of all the stuff in the body. Okay, so my new layout, my layout 1 page has a blank body, and the only styles are the reset rule and controlling the body. Since there's no font, I don't even need that font family. I'll get rid of that. Okay, so there's my layout 1 page. Let's go here. I'm going to click on layout number 1. There it is. There's my layout 1. Okay, now I'm looking over at my PDF, and let's see. I'm going to stop sharing real quick. Bear with me just a moment. I'm just trying to arrange my little cameras and pictures and stuff like that so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so what you're doing, if you've got that PDF file handy, then you can start working on, let's say, the first or second layout on the top. Otherwise, just give me just a moment and I'm going to do that one. Okay, I just did the HTML part of it. Now I'm heading over here and I'm going to put in that. I think I'm going to do that. And I'm going to maximize. And I'm going to go back to my screen. So I'm going to turn my sharing on. There we go. That is layout one. That's the layout I'd like you to create. Here's what it looks like on the PDF. It's just a big blank area. And then there's a separate bar across the top. What do I want you to mimic? I don't care about the colors. Just make sure the color stands out so that way it's dynamically different. I know I was going to use that HSL, but I was just trying to go fast and I wanted to do something that was quite a bit different. So this is layout number one. Go ahead and take a moment and create this. If you wouldn't mind, maybe in the chat or, oh, yeah, in the chat, just write got it or done or something like that, just so I get a feel for when folks have got it. I learned this the other day during my office hours. I was in Zoom and I was doing something. I had it on my tablet in the kitchen while I was cooking some food and stuff. But if I held my hand in front of the camera, Zoom knew that I was holding my hand up and it actually did the little raise hand icon. And this was on my tablet on the Zoom. And then I did my thumbs up and it knew I was doing a thumbs up and it put the little thumbs up icon right there on there. It doesn't seem to work on the desktop app, but it worked on my Zoom on my tablet. Cool. All right, so Grady's got that. Grady, if you wouldn't mind, I think you've probably got an idea of what's going on. So if you were so inclined, do a file save as on your page, make a layout 2, and then try, you don't have to try the very next one, but maybe try something that's a little bit harder than this one. So that way you've got your second, maybe even your third taken care of. I want to do these first couple on this first page, and then I want to start to increase the complexity a bit. Okay. So got that bar right across the top. Hey, Grady, just out of curiosity, what did you use for the height of your bar across the top? Use pixels, yep. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I did kind of use a percentage. I used a viewport height, which is something we kind of tinkered with the other day. So let me jump back over to my markup here. Now, by the way, there's the HTML. It's just a set of div tags. I just used a div, opening and closing div tag. That's it. But here it is. My div has a height of 20 VHs, which you can consider to be 20% of the viewport height. 20 VHs is 20% of the viewport height. There you go. And that's it. Yeah. So the first layout on here, not very complicated, right? Which means the second one's probably not that complicated either. what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my screen sharing. And I'm going to actually, before I turn off my screen sharing, just so you can kind of see what my plan is here, I'm going to take my layout one page, which I've got. I'm going to do File, Save As, and I'm going to change the file name to layout number 2.html, layout2.html. I'm going to change this up here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And now I'm going to do this one down here, the one that has the smaller bar across the top and then the bigger bar, but just beneath it. Okay, so I'll do the smaller bar and the bigger bar. That's what I'm going to do for layout 2. You can do the same one as me if you're game. Well, let me stop sharing. And let's see. Got to tweak the HTML a little bit. And now I got to tweak this. Actually, I might do some classes. Okay. Let's see. I'll turn my sharing back on. There it is. Okay. So here's what I'm doing, by the way. I haven't even tested my page yet. So I'm going up to my web address, my address bar on my browser. I'm just going to change layout 1 to layout 2. And there we go. So now I've got a smaller top bar. I've got a bigger bar just beneath it. And I've got the rest of the web page. My colors look a little bit weird, a little bit muted, but that's okay. And ultimately, my goal is something like this layout down here. Now, you may have been trying this one. That's pretty good too. If you can do this one here in the top right corner on that first page, it's just as easy as the one right here below it. Obviously, the second bar is just taller, so nothing too difficult with that. Take a second, create something that looks kind of like that. Obviously, don't have to do the same colors as I did. Now, if you are the courageous type, if you try something and it doesn't work, I wouldn't mind hearing about that too. So if something goes south, let me know, because it's better if we make mistakes on these easier layouts, so that way we can figure out what's going on. Then we would do the more complicated stuff. We can make a whole bunch of new mistakes. We don't want to make the same easy mistakes on the tough stuff. So let's solve the easy mistakes first, and then we'll figure out those harder mistakes later. Okay. This one wasn't too different. So if you got the first one, let's see what I did here for the second one. So on my code, there's my HTML. Zoom in on that. So I've got two divs, two sets of div tags, opening and closing for each. I gave them classes this time. Since I'm getting more divs, I wanted to be able to easily identify them so that I could style them differently and stuff like that. So you'll notice My first one is class equals top bar. My next one is class equals hero. I picked that name because whenever you're at a website, you know they got that really big photo on there. It's called the hero image. So the hero image is a marketing term used in desktop publishing, also used in web design. But the hero image or the hero graphic is that main big photo that the visitor sees first. And the kind of layout that this is often is used for websites where they have obviously a top bar up there for branding, logos, navigation. Then they have this big hero section for a photo, often a product promotion, something like that. And then they've got other web page content below that hero graphic. So that's the HTML for it. Still pretty simple though. And here's my CSS. My top bar, I gave it a height of 15% of the viewport height, and my hero is 35% of the viewport height. That light color look. Ooh, actually, I like that combination. Sandy brown, that light, really light creamy yellow with that dark blue. Looks good to me. Okay. Anybody getting hosed up or stumped on some of this stuff? Okay, well, in that case, I'm gonna deviate a little bit here. And I'm not gonna hide my screen for number 3 here because we're gonna do something a little bit unusual. What do I wanna do? So I'm imagining something a little bit new. So I've got this layout right here. Smaller top bar, bigger hero bar. I wanna pretend that I've got a logo, okay? I'm not gonna use any images today, but I want another block. And I want that block to be covering up these 2 bars right at the seam. So I want it to be half of it, I want it to be in the yellow section, half of it, I want it to be in the blue section. On my page, what I'm envisioning is something right about here. Half of it in the sandy brown section, half of it in the light yellow section. And in fact, I want it to be round. I want a round block. I know that sounds funny to say. I want a round div right over here. I'm not going to hide my screen while I work on this, but if you've got an idea for what I'm going for, work a little bit ahead of me. Okay, I'll buy you some time. Work ahead of me, start up on the HTML, and then start up on the styling. So, but I'm going to work with this one with you. So I want that object to be right over here, not all the way to the very left, but on that left portion, covering up both of those things. First, the HTML. HTML first. Well, I know it's going to be a div. Where do I put the div? I've actually can put it in several places. I could put the div within my top bar, which I kind of like the best, and I'll explain why in just a moment. I could put it here in the hero section, or I could put it as a separate div down here. Here's why I like putting it in the top bar, because what I'm envisioning this would be used on a real website would be like the logo for the website. And logos for websites are usually part of the top bar. And if content is part of a particular section, it should be in that section, even if it looks like it's not in that section. So if I had social media icons that were down here, ooh, that would be fun to do too. Not real icons, but little blocks to represent them. So I think I'm going to put it up here in my top bar. So I go to my top bar in between the opening and closing div tags. I'm going to press my enter key to give myself room to work. And I'm going to create another div. Class equals, I'm going to call it logo, because that's what I'm pretending it would house, is the logo for the business. Okay. HTML is done. I go to my top bar rule set, position relative. Relative position on the parent. That doesn't do anything by itself, but it's very important. There it is. That's how it looks. Now I need that child in there. Div.logo. Now div logo is the child. What I'm going to do first is so that we can visualize it here. I'm going to do width. This time I will do pixels because it normally would contain some logo or an image, and that probably wouldn't resize very much, although some situations it might. But I'll do something really obvious like 200 pixels, height 200 pixels, and come on, background color. Ooh, I'm going to use my HSL-A or HSL with transparency. I'm going to copy that, pop it in there, but I want it to be semi-transparent, 0.6. Okay, let's see what that looks like. Oh, there it is. It's right up there. It's actually, I need to make it a little darker so it's more noticeable. There we go. So now you can see where that square is right up there. I don't want it to be a square though. I want it to be a circle. In the chat, anybody have a guess? How can I convert this div, this very square shaped div, into a circle or a disc? You got it. Border radius 50%. Yep, I think both Reagan and Denise had this one down. Border radius 50% is going to give me that circle shape. Very cool. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I can see it. Now I'm going to do position absolute. Basically, when you do absolute positioning, it's because you want to be very precise when you place something. So position absolute position within a relative parent, okay? So I do position relative on the parent and I do position absolute on the child. And when I do that, it's going to position this logo based on the dimensions of the parent top bar. Now, in addition to saying position absolute, I have to be very precise on where I want it to be. For instance, I could say something like, I want it to be 3M from the left and negative 5M from the bottom. There we go. Left 3M, bottom negative 5M. So whenever I do position absolute, I'm usually following it up with two directions, left and bottom, top and left, top and right, bottom and right. Doesn't matter the order, but you need two angles that form a corner in order to position that element. And that's going to allow me to push this little disc around. I'm going to go a little lower, bottom 8M. Actually, I'm okay with that. Yeah, I like that. And I'll move this over, 4M, pop it over a little bit. Yeah, there we go. So we've got a couple things going on here. Don't forget, very important, position relative on the parent. Got to do that position relative on the parent. What if I forget to do that, by the way? Well, if I don't have the position relative on the parent, my disk is all, I'm trying to point at it like you can see where I'm pointing. My disk is all the way down there in the lower left corner of my browser window. It's being positioned based on the body of the page, which I don't want to have happen at the moment. So you're rarely, very rarely, if ever, going to position an object absolutely based on the body of the page. Generally, you're going to be positioning it absolutely based on a relative positioned parent or an absolute position parent. Even though I'm saying position relative here, you can also do position absolute within a position absolute, but this is the more common scenario, I believe. Okay, so position relative on that parent. Now my logo has the same width and height, make it a square, and then border radius of 50% makes it into a disc. Obviously, you could play around with these numbers. If I did 40%, it would be not quite as circular, but it still looks pretty cool to me. What is that? That's what Android calls it, a squircle, something like that, square circle combination. And of course, if it wasn't a perfect square, then it would start to look more like an oval or something like that. So if I had a width of 250, come on, Where's my 0? There it is. Okay, it's a little more oblong. And if I did the 50% again, border radius, there you go. Makes kind of like in a little oval. Maybe you like those ovals. So yeah, you can play around with those different things. I'll put it back to 200 by 200, or maybe I'll do 220 by 220. Okay. Not too shabby. Huh. I wonder if I should have done that as layout number 3. I left it on my layout 2. I never did a save as, even though I was kind of prepared to. So before I forget, I'm happy with that particular layout. I'm going to do File, Save As, layout number 3. Okay, layout number 3. I'm going to kind of reset here. Let's clean things up. I'm going to get rid of all that HTML or CSS. I get rid of all of that. I'm starting from a clean slate. This is going to be layout number 3. I'm looking at my PDF. And I think what I'd like to try, this one could be tough. I'm on the first page still, looking at that bottom right layout on the first page. Now you're thinking, well, the top part's no big deal. We've already kind of done that one. How can I combine that with this down here? I bet you can figure it out, actually. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to work ahead on this and try to catch up with me. Now, give you a little clue. 2 elements side by side. Think of how you did the anchor tags at the beginning of class. Remember I had those 10 anchor tags that were blocks side by side? Same exact technique. I went 2 blocks side by side instead of 10 blocks side by side. My anchor tags are side by side, so certainly we can do that. Side by side. How do we use Flexbox to get 2 elements side by side? We've actually done this in class before, and we actually did this a few minutes ago on our very first page, the one with the nav menu on it. I'm not going to go to that and check it out. You can look at yours, but that's the layout I want you to work on. That's the one I'm going to work on too. It's got a top bar, and it's got the big hero bar, and then it's got 2 blocks beneath the hero that are side by side. They're also equal widths. They're taking up the same amount of width on the screen there. That's what we're doing next. All right, I'm on my layout number 3. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, let's see. I need to do the HTML first. Let's see. There's a couple ways you can do this stuff. So don't worry if you don't feel like you're doing it the same way as me or what I might do, just based on what you already know. It's going to be tough, but at least do as much as you can. Okay, that's kind of how I've got mine looking there. So there's our goal. Smaller top bar, bigger bar beneath that, and then these two side by side. For an extra challenge, notice I don't have any scrolls on my browser here. I don't have any up and down scrolling, and I don't have any horizontal scrolling at the bottom. So no scroll bars are visible. Even if this was a smaller page, no scroll bars are visible. Oops, I just exposed my my markup there, at least parts of it. So looks like you got a little bit of a clue. I'll just try to hide some of it just to see if that gives just a hint. But I'll show it all to you here in just a minute. Anybody watching that TV show, La Brea? I think it comes on Tuesday nights. Okay, let's see what we got here. First, the HTML. So, and I rewrote this. Remember, I started off kind of a blank page for my layout 3, but I did that top bar thing again, gave a div with a class equals top bar, and then I did a div class equals hero. And then here's the important part. For that third block, which has the 2 inside of it, I created myself a third div, which I just called main1, and I put 2 divs in that. So I basically needed to create a parent for those 2 little divs. And I want you to remember that if you need to get content that's side by side, always imagine that there's a parent that contains those side by side objects. So for instance, way back at 12:45, almost an hour ago, we did this web layouts page. And that web layouts page had a nav, which was the parent for all of these anchors. That nav was a Flexbox parent because I wanted those anchors to be side by side as blocks anyway. So there was a parent that was display flex. Same concept here on my layout number 3. This div class main1 or whatever you called yours is the Flexbox parent. And then these are the 2 kids inside. So there it is. Of course, the top bar, pretty standard stuff. I did a height of 15 VHs and a background color. For my hero, I did a height of 35 VHs and a background color. And for the main1, I did display flex, and then I did flex direction row. So instead of using flex flow, I just did flex direction. I was going to do flex flow first, but I realized, well, I don't want these things to wrap underneath. So I just did flex direction. I wanted them to be in a row orientation. In addition to that, I've got rules that are controlling each of those kids. They have a width of 50 VWs. They are 50% of the viewport width. And I gave them a height of 50 VHs, 50% of the viewport height. Because I chose 15 for my top bar and 35 for my hero, 35 and 15 is 50. That means I had 50% left. So that's where I did that 50%, since I wanted these to be equal and side by side, 50 VWs. And then of course, background color. They have the same basic structure. I've got my first div that's a child of main, and I've got my second div that's a child of main. I'm going to put this chunk here in the chat because it's a way you've seen me do this before a little bit, but it's something I want you to think of a little bit more often when you want to control a couple of key elements that are within a parent. So I'm just using nth child. Now I could have given each of those blocks a class like left block and right block, and that would have been pretty smart too. But I wanted to use this one so that you could see this in action. So this is it's called an nth child pseudo class. It's not quite a normal class like when we do class equals main one or class equals hero. It's a pseudo class. It's a way I can kind of control that particular div without using a real class. And then they've got some different colors. I did my little HSL trick, but I made one of them lighter and the other one is darker. And I could dial these in. I could change these like to 230 and 230, and that should change them quite a bit. Oh, they're more bluish purple now. Yeah, it looks pretty good to me. What if I did 130? Just kind of curious. What does 130 do? Ooh, shades of green. Actually, I like that one too. Cool. Yeah, it's kind of fun with those HSL colors. You can just change those out pretty easily. Okay, so that is that. What do you think? Any issues, challenges? Cool. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so the divs are a little bit weird. That's why I'm trying to put a bunch of spaces on mine, and we're still trying to keep it super simple. When you're looking at a web page, it really does help just to kind of think about, I want to bring this over, what blocks are where, and what contains what. So with these elements, there's not many divs. Let me show you something that looks kind of wacky. I'm going to jump over to Apple. And I'm all zoomed out, so the Apple site looks really small because I was doing this right before class. Let me zoom in to 100%. And I've got a little feature on my browser where I can do this. I'm going to put the layout view. So basically, this is a little overlay on top of the Apple website, which allows me to more easily visualize the divs, the blocks, whatever they are. And we can kind of get a better sense of what's going on. Now, if I zoom out on this page, you'll actually have an even better sense of what's going on. So this is the layout for Apple's website, Apple's homepage. And I know everything's really tiny. We don't need to read the text. We don't need to see the images. But we just start to get a feel for, okay, they just have a bunch of blocks on here. Now, some of the blocks are taking the full width of the screen, just like on here. Some of these blocks are taking the full width of the screen, like the yellow and the blue or gold and the blue. Sometimes you want blocks to only take up 50% of the screen, and you want those blocks to be side by side. And that's what they're doing here as well. They've got some blocks that are 50% and 50%. But yeah, that's what they're doing. Apple is doing the same thing we're doing. They're just doing more of it. So whereas I might want you to focus on one section, here, let me zoom in a bit. Let's say our goal is, I want you to be able to create 2 blocks side by side. Can you do it? Well, that's kind of what you're working on right now. And once you feel like that skill is being mastered, well, then you start to add more complexity. All right, well, cool. I can get 2 blocks side by side. Can I get 4 blocks side by side or 6 blocks side by side? I bet you can. Once you have those 6 blocks side by side, can you go into those individual blocks and structure them where they have their own little child blocks? Like here's 2 little blocks, learn more and buy, that are side by side, right above or right below this other thing. So it's the same basic concept, just a little bit more complexity on these big famous websites. And let's see, what's another one we could check out? All right, let's look at Honda Australia's website, if it's going to load up for me. Oh, it's the same navigation menu they've always used. in the CIS 295 class, we have an assignment where we reproduce this navigation menu. And that was like a year ago. You figured they would have changed it since then. So it's actually a much simpler site than I thought. Let me jump over to motorcycles and see if we get something a little more complicated. Yeah, not too bad. It's still actually kind of neat. Oh, they got a couple neat things going on. They've got this fixed sidebar over here on the right. That's pretty cool. Looks like that pops out. But let me turn on my overlay. And once again, we can start to see that, all right, well, this web page is really just made up of a bunch of blocks. There's a big block that contains this video, kind of like a hero graphic. This is a hero video. Then there's a block that goes all the way across its width, obviously with some text. Of course, at the very top, we got our navigation. If I scroll down, 2 blocks side by side. Yeah, it's kind of neat. Oh, look at that. 3 blocks side by side. They're going crazy. So it's all the same basic thing that we are doing right now. So there's our page. Maybe not as fancy as Honda Australia, but if I did my little overlay, there it is. It's just a bunch of blocks. Turn that off. Okay. So the HTML doesn't have to be too tricky. I want to do another one here, but I'll leave my screen on. Let's do something a little bit more complicated. Where is my, let's see, where's my Opera browser? That's what I'm looking for. And I want that. I want this. Let's take a little exciting trip all the way down to page 2. In fact, we're going to do 2 more. We're going to do a layout 4 and a layout 5. Let's see. And let's see, who's going to vote? So I've got 6 layouts. This is on page 2 of that PDF. We've got 6 of them on here. Which one are we going to try? We'll do it as a group. So which one seems the most confusing, the trickiest? Layout number 2, does that mean right here, the top right corner? Yeah. And can we try bottom right? All right. You guys win. We'll do both of them. Okay, we're going to do the top right corner and the bottom right corner. Now, before you start a new web page layout, you sit there and you stare at it for a while and you think how that layout is similar or different than layouts you've created in the past. So for instance, I'm going to focus my attention on the top right. That's going to be our layout number 4. And up here we see, well, okay, well, there's a little bar at the top. I've done that a few times now, right? With a little top bar. And then there's a bigger bar in the middle. And then there's a bar at the bottom. I want you to kind of simplify it. I know there's 3 blocks in the middle, but think of it as 1 div at the top, 1 div in the middle, 1 div at the bottom. Top, middle, and bottom. So you work on that main structure first, and then you can go in and break this up. Well, instead of 2 blocks side by side, there's 3 blocks side by side. So let's tackle this. We're working on this one right here in the top right corner. I'm going to move it off to my other screen so I can eyeball it. But it looks like it's got a top bar, a big middle bar, and then a similar, smaller bottom bar. So let's see. I'm going to drag that away. I'm going to go to my layout here. I'm on layout number 3. I'm going to do File, Save As. I'm going to call it layout number 4. And we're doing pretty good time-wise. I don't think we're going to have any problem taking care of both of these. Okay, so this is layout number 4. Let me clean up, clean house. Let me clean out the body, and I'm going to clean out all of this stuff. I know you're thinking it's always so scary to delete things, especially if it seems like you're going to type it again. Don't be bothered by having to retype stuff. Nothing wrong with a clean slate in order to start your work. It does take a little bit more time. That is true. But I promise you that time is going to be well worth it. So here's my layout 4. Nothing in the body, nothing of substance in the CSS, just the reset rule and the body rule. How's it looking? So if I went to layout 4, there it is, blank blue. Okay, so now I'm glancing over at my thumbnail, and I see there is my div class equals top bar. And then I've got div class equals Actually, I'm not going to call it hero since I know it's going to be divided up. I'll call it main. And then we've got div class equals bottom bar. That's all I'm going to do for the HTML for now. I'm going to structure these three parts first, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put three divs within that middle one. So I'm just focusing my attention. I want the top bar, I want the big middle bar, and I want the bottom bar. Top bar, middle bar, bottom bar. Great. Now that we've got that HTML taken care of, remember I'm on my layout number 4.html. And we start the style. My top bar is going to have a height, I don't know, I'm guessing 20 VHs, 20% of the viewport height. I'll give it a background color. Sandy brown. You know what I'm going to do? This is pretty crazy. Comma, div, bottom bar. I'm going to style both of these the same. They're both going to have the same height of 20 VHs, and they're both going to have the same sandy brown color. Because even in my thumbnail, they're both red. Obviously, one looks a little taller, but I did these in Microsoft Word, so I'm sure that was user error on my part, not because I wanted that bottom one to be a little bit bigger. Yeah, so there we go. My top bar and my bottom bar are using a grouped selector so that they both have the same characteristics, the same height, the same background color. Now for that main one. Let's see, it's a main. Div.main. Height, what should my height be? Who's the math genius in class? What height should I use if I want to fill up the viewport? $60. Denise has got it. And she picked 60 because she's a math magician. Is that the word? There's 20% for the top, 20% for the bottom. That gets to 40. 40 and 60 is 100. 60 VHs. And let's see. Background color, I'll do that FFC. Good enough. This should give us something to look at. So if I look at this page now, hey, didn't this just happen to Denise? Didn't this happen to you the other day? Let me hit refresh. Oops, let me go forward. Well, there you go. It's happened to me too. What did I do? I just hit refresh and it seemed to fix itself. Yeah, looks pretty good. You know what? I'm going to be a little bit more generous with these bars. Instead of 20 VHs, I'm going to do 25 VHs, which means this needs to be 50. There we go. Top bar, middle bar, bottom bar. If you really wanted to maximize the number of layouts that you do on here, by the way, there you go. There's top bar, middle bar, bottom bar on page 1. And you could do something like that. And just take this into a file, save as, and you got another one. Okay, but where am I working? I'm working on this one. Okay. So there's the CSS for that particular layout. I'm not 100% done though, because the main bar has 3 bars inside, or 3 blocks inside of it. I'm going to press my enter key to get room to work. And I'm going to do 3 divs. Div times 3. So I've got 3 sets of div tags in there. I'm not even going to give them classes. I'm just going to treat them all the same. Kind of. I'll do the nth child pseudo class though. Okay, so I got my 3 divs. Within my main div. Okay, well, since those items are going to be side by side, I want you to think flex. And if we're thinking flex, then the parent div main needs to be a flex parent. So display flex on that flex parent. Flex direction row. Kind of not necessary to do that, but I still wanted to use it just to kind of keep us thinking about these various Flexbox properties, because it's very specific. I want this to be a Flexbox parent. So I put in display flex to make it a flex parent. And I do want these children to be in a row, so I put that on the parent as well, flex direction row. I want them to be horizontal as opposed to a vertical column. Now, div.main space div. All of the divs in there. Guess I don't need too much in here. I could do this. I don't think it's really necessary, but I could put in the height of 50 VHs. However, you're going to find that when you do, in fact, I might take this out just so you can see how it works. With a flex parent, if you establish the height of the flex parent, then generally the children will stretch and accommodate that flex parent. That's not normal in other situations. If we just wanted to have a div that was empty, it would collapse on itself and you'd have to give it height to force it open. So that's one way we could force them open. I'm going to take that out for now. And I might come back to it in just a moment. Instead, what I'm going to do, div.main space div colon nth child number 1. First block. Now in my little thumbnail here, these blocks are different colors so that we can easily see them. So I'm going to do kind of the same thing. I'm going to put in background, I can spell, color, HSL, 130, comma, 70. Nope, not the commas. I got to remember 70%. I'm so used to doing those commas. Space 60% slash 0.5. Okay, that's going to be the first one. And then I'm going to copy this whole rule. Paste, paste. I'm going to have one for the second and one for the third. And I'm just going to change these out. And I'm going to change this first one to 0.3, 0.6, 0.9. So the only difference in the colors for these three is going to be the transparency. That should be enough. Oh, apparently I'm lying to you. Apparently it's not enough at all. Do I need that height? Let's find out. Okay. Now, am I doing layout 4? Was I supposed to be doing 5? Yeah, I guess this is right. But clearly I've got a mistake going on here somewhere because I'm not seeing any of this stuff work. Now, let's see. I'm trying to see if I can spot my typo. So if you notice my typo, then let me know. I'm assuming I've made a mistake somewhere. My HTML, I feel pretty good about. Looks like I've got the word background color spelled properly. Those look like they're written well. Let me hit refresh just in case. Now, something else I might do, let me cancel out my live server and then hit it again. Let's see if I'm just not getting a fresh. Nope, I must have a mistake in here somewhere. All right, let's look at it a little bit more. There's layout number 4. Do I have child dimensions? Well, let's see what I do have. Do you think it's my width collapsing? I think that's what you might mean, Grady. My width could be collapsing here. I'm not using a flex property that I was kind of hoping to hold off and not use today, but I think that's exactly what I need. And basically, I used width before. So we did that width of 50% or 50 VHs on my layout 3. And you're right, I don't have that. So Grady, I bet money that is what I'm missing. My divs have collapsed on themselves, but they've collapsed widthwise. And that is another side effect of making them flex children. Normally divs or blocks will be as wide as they can be, but here's how we'll obviously be able to prove it with 33 V8 or VWs this time. And now we can see them. However, by doing 33 VWs, I have an issue. Notice that they look pretty good, but 33, 33, and 33 is 99, not 100. And you can see very barely, I have a little bit of gap of space over in the far right side. So using a width of 33 is not really good in this particular situation. So instead of using the width like this, I'm going to show you another way to do this. There's another property called flex. This is so weird. I mean, it's very tricky. Or I shouldn't say tricky. It's easy to be confused by it because there's display flex for the parent. And then there's a flex property you can put for the child, the flex children. Now I'm going to type something and test it to make sure I'm right. And then I'll come back and explain it. 1, 0, auto. Yep, that works. Okay. So what I've got here is with this flex property, what that really means is, in fact, I'm going to comment it out. A flex of 1, 0 auto is the same as a flex grow of 1, a flex shrink of 0, and a flex basis of auto. So the flex property is a shorthand property of flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. My goal is to not go into too much detail on these yet, but basically a flex grow of 1 is going to maximize each of these equally. Now you can use a flex grow in a couple of different situations. So we could control these divs independently, and I could rig it so that flex, my middle div is a flex grow of 2, which means it would be twice as big as the others. And the reason it's a grow, because as the browser gets wider, you can have it grow twice as fast as the others. It's kind of weird, but I think we'll play around with that more when we're doing some other stuff. But making all of these a flex grow of 1 allows them to fill up the space. Now, I could have done a flex grow of 0, but I think that would reproduce the problem that I had before, and they would all collapse on themselves. So flex grow of 1 was really probably the most critical thing there. In fact, I'm kind of curious if I didn't have those others. Yeah, it would still be okay. I never usually do. I always do the flex property, so I always have this in there. But even though it's technically not necessary for this particular example. So flex basis, you can kind of think of as width. It's very similar to width. For instance, I could have put 30% here. However, you're not going to notice a difference because I've got that flex grow of 1. It's going to look the same. But if I had a flex grow of 0 with a flex basis of 30%, they would be 30, 30, 30, totaling 90. I could have done 33.3. That's pretty darn close. But I still, you might not be able to see it, but trust me, I still have just a little smidgen of background showing through, because even 33.3 only gets me to 99.9. Again, though, putting that flex grow of 1 on there will take care of the issue. I think I will leave this at 33. I don't know why I want to do that. No, I'm going to put it back at auto, even though, because it's not really hurting us, but I don't want to delete it because I want you to get used to seeing it. So I'm going to do that. And in real life, I typically just use this flex property with 1, 0, and auto, and sometimes I'll change those numbers, but I think that's good for now. Otherwise, that is that. And for the top right corner, I think that's a pretty good representation of it. The key that is easy for students to forget is that when you want elements side by side, you're going to use a flex container, which means the elements in question need to have their own container. Okay. Although there are ways to get elements side by side without flex, if you're going to use flex, and I think you should a lot of the time, then make sure they're in their own container, even though I can't really see that container. If that container had a background color that was purple, I wouldn't really notice it because the children take up all the space, but the container is still a critical element. Cool, that's layout number 4. I'm going to do file save as. I'm going to change mine to layout number 5. And let's see, I'm going to change this. Oops, I never changed my title before. Anyway, that's layout number 5. I'm going to delete a bunch of stuff. I can't remember what that next one looks like that we're going to do. But I'm going to delete. I'm going to take all that stuff out there. The body is empty on my layout 5. The styles are relatively empty on my layout 5. I'm going to change my page view. Layout number 5. Cool. All right. What do we got? Dan picked this one. Second page, bottom right. Okay, worked ahead of me on this one. I'm not going to hide my screen, but yeah, this does something a little bit weird. Ignore the red block first, okay? Ignore the red block and pretend you're just doing this one right up here. It's got a big chunk on the left and a big chunk on the right. Now, I'm actually feeling pretty good about this one because on my RR Phillips 95 dev, that's kind of what I have. I got a big block on the left and I got a big block on the right. So I made this one not too long ago. Close that, close that. So do that first, get it going, and then tackle that red block, okay? So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna worry about that red block. I'm only gonna worry about the 2 blocks, that big one on the left and the blue one and then the green one. Okay, so I know that I'm gonna need 2 divs. I got my left block and I got my right block. Okay, but I've already said, if you're going to put 2 elements side by side, you're going to use flex. And if you're going to use flex, those elements need to be in a container. Well, technically, body is the container. I don't like to use body as the container. Now let me do some indenting so you can see what's going on here, nice and easily. There we go. I've got a div for my left block. I've got a div for my right block. And then I've got a div that contains them, and I've called it container. In the real world, you'll often see these quite a bit, and wrapper or outer wrapper are popular names. A couple years ago, we were doing an assignment, who knows, probably similar to this one in class, and the student was asking, well, why not just use body as the container? I didn't have a good answer for him because, yeah, you could use body as the container. However, I don't like doing that as often because the body is kind of a special block. I don't think it would cause really any problems in most situations, but it's not how I learned to do it. And I guess I've got kind of these habits from over time. Not all my habits are necessarily good and smart. As you can tell, I'm drinking Diet Coke. So all kinds of bad habits going on. I don't think this is truly a bad habit. It's a very common way in web development to contain key elements, big page wrapper, outer container, something like that. Okay, so that's my HTML. I'm going to head up to my CSS, div.container. It looks like we're at about the 90-minute mark for our class, but this will go pretty quickly. It's actually not too tough. So hang out with me if you can. I understand if you need to head out. That's perfectly reasonable. I've still got my recorder going though, and shouldn't take long to finish this up. Now my container is going to be display flex. And the flex direction is going to be a row. You know what? Flex flow. Oh, wrap. If this is a really narrow page, maybe I want these to swap so that they're vertical. Okay, so that's my container, div.container. Good with that. Div.left block. Now my left block, I'm going to do a flex property on there. 50%. Flex grow of 1, flex shrink of 0, flex basis of 50%, because I want it to be 50% of the width. That's going to affect my wrapping thing, but that's all right. So I'm good with that. And then the height is going to be 100 VHs. And the background color is going to be HSL 130, comma, nope, not comma, 80%, space 40%, and then 0.8. That's my left block. My right block is going to have the same flex, 50%. It's going to have the same height, 100 VHs. It's going to have a slightly different background color, 230, I think. Let's see how that's looking. There you go. Well, it's blue and green on the picture, so I guess I'll swap it out. 230 and then 130. Oh, there it is, blue and green. Okay, so HTML again, pretty simple. We've got two divs that are contained within a container div, a parent div. The parent div is display flex, and I'm using flex flow row wrap. Flex direction row would have been fine. And in fact, even if I didn't have this at all, I think it would still work. I'm going to take it out real quick. Yeah, looks fine. However, I'm going to put, ooh, I didn't mean to do that. Control Z. There we go. I do want to have that in there because I like it, and I typically do use it a lot. And if we want to make responsive pages, then that's a good habit to get into. So I'll leave that in there. Now, both my left block and my right block are pretty darn similar. They both have the same flex characteristics. A really critical piece here is the 50%. And of course, height. They're both filling up the space. And they've got different colors. Any colors are fine. So there we go. We got that part right there. Next is that red block. This red block could really be anywhere. It could be in the blue. It could be in the green. I mean, in the left or in the right. It could be separate. How do we want to do it? Let's do it separate. So on the HTML, I'm going to put it right after the container. So it's in the container, but it's not within the left or the right blocks. Div class equals, I don't know, red block. Okay, I got the red block. Now I got to style that red block so that we can see it. The width is going to be 50 VWs. It's going to be half the width of the screen. It's going to have a height of 20 VHs, 20% of the viewport height. It's going to have a background color. Let me just copy this HSL. And I think red is in the 300s. I'm going to try like 350. The highest number you would have here is 360. I think that might be red. Yeah, reddish. There it is right there. It's right up at that top. It's actually doing some weird stuff. This looks funny. But what's happening is my red div is pushing down my main section. It's pushing down that big container right there, or it's pushing down that flex parent. So my blue and green blocks are pushed down. This dark blue you see here is the body of the page. So just putting that there is having a very weird effect. So what I want to do very, very soon is I want to position it. Now, if I'm going to position absolute, that red block, I need to make sure that its parent is position relative. So let's see, who's the parent for the red block? The container is the red block's parent, which means my container should be position relative. Position relative on the parent, position absolute on the child. That's not a hard and fast rule 100% of the time, but that's a good rule for most of the time, 90% of the time. So that's probably what we're going to do here. I think it's going to work like a charm. Now, when we position absolute, I want this to be 1M from the top, 50% from the left. Actually, I'm going to lie here. I am going to want 50%, but I'm going to do 5 M's from the left, just so we can see what that looks like. Now we can see where that red block is in relation to stuff. Now I want that red block to be in the middle. So here's how I move it to the middle. I do left 50%, or I could do 50 VWs. Either way, that's not going to be quite proper. It pushes it too far to the right when I do 50 VWs. So what I'm going to do in addition to that, transform, translate X, negative 50%. I am doing a percent there. And that's going to nudge it back over there. So what we've got going on here is I'm being very specific about the positioning of that red block. I want it to be one, I'm going to change this out to like 2 M's from the top. So I want it to be 2 M's from the top and 50 VWs from the left. But then I'm pushing it backwards that way, negative 50%. The negative 50% here corresponds to the width of the red block. The 50 VWs here corresponds to the width of the viewport. And of course, if I didn't do 50%, if I did something like 30%, then you would see that it would go back to the left, but not quite as far. Maybe you want it to be a little asymmetrical, off center, you know, that looks kind of cool to me as well. But I'll put it back at 50% here, puts it over there. And that's pretty darn close to what we got going on with this layout in the bottom right corner. Yeah, good call picking that one. There we go. I'm going to do some quick publishing before I'm done with class. Again, I know some folks have to head out, but I haven't published on Recorder in quite a while. So I want to make sure that I do that. So what I am going to do is I'm going to open up my index page. And let me zoom out a bit just so I can see this better. I know it looks kind of crowded. And let's see, I'm going to take a div from my previous one. Div left block and right. Sure. Back over here. So I've got the flex on there. I know that's pretty tiny, so let me zoom back in. I've got the flex 50% for the both of them, a height of 100 VHs for both of them, and then different background colors. But I'm going to publish this, and you'll see where it's at. I'm going to go and publish it right now. So let's see, back over that index. I'm going to copy this. I need to change my homepage too. Our homepage is looking a little tired, a little boring. I don't want that. Let's shift tab. Okay, what do we got? This is a variety of basic web page layouts. Both I can never spell the word participation, 6A and 6B. Yeah, we'll still do a few more of these on Thursday. And then I'll call it the layouts. And I'm going to be linking to web layouts.html. So I've updated my index page. Cool. Let's see. WinSCP. Let's launch the FTP client. It's over there. Let me hit login. Nope, I need to go there. It's thinking it's on the other screen. I'll bring it over here. There it is. Okay, so I'm in my 195 folder on the server over on the left. Where am I at here? I'm in my images. I need to go up. Here we go. Now I'm looking at the change date, October 26. I'm going to select all the web pages that are different for October 26. And I'm going to drag them over to the server. Looks like they're all in the correct spot for me. Now I got to test it online. Always test it online. So if I head over here, new browser tab, our Philips 195. There's my menu down there. Layouts. Okay, layout number 1. Cool. Hit back. Layout number 2. Cool. Hit back. Layout number 3. Looks good. Back. Layout number 4. Looks good. Back. Layout number 5. Cool. We're all set. So those are all published. You can obviously reference them. Remember, your goal is never to go to anybody else's site and just copy code, just copy and paste, but you can display it and then retype it yourself. Even though what you retype is going to look really darn close to what you were seeing, that's okay. I still want you to retype it because it is going to be a better learning experience that way. Cool. So thank you very much for hanging out with me. All of that stuff is posted. There's my homepage. I gotta tinker with that a little bit, change things out, change colors, change the layout, make it mobile friendly. Okay. So with that, I'll bid you farewell, and I'll see you in a couple days, right? Today's only Tuesday. So yeah, see you on Thursday Night Football night. Yep. See you, Grady. Thanks all. Put my markup back up. I'm not doing anything else to my pages, so no need to sit on the edge of your seat, see if I'm going to do anything cool and interesting. I am not.
Ralph, are you hanging out for just a little bit?
Oh no, yeah, I can be around.
I was just getting a little bit lost today, so like kind of backstepping a bunch. So with creating in the HTML, when you're making divs, they're layered in the way that you make them, right? So like instance, it's top to bottom, right? It's not like anything.
Well, you're right.
strange
Yeah, that's right.
or-
They will be in that sequence. So yeah, so if it looks like I've got three divs, one on top of the other, then that's how they would look in the HTML, one on top of the other.
Okay. And then one of the things that I was wondering, I was thinking about it incorrectly to begin with. But when we were doing the big left and right split page with that block in the center,
Mhm.
my initial idea was, can I just create a div class and then create one child div under that and then style it as like the block as it's separate and then do the nth child for the one on the right? Or is that the incorrect way of structuring it?
I didn't quite follow. Is that so can you kind of talk here? I'm going to do a file save as. I'm going to call this layout 5B. Okay, so let me delete my red block for a moment. Okay, now, so do you think I should have the container or not? It's not 100% necessary, so kind of talk me through. I want to write what you were just describing.
Yeah, so when I first started out, pretty much I just had div class and then a block. And then I was trying to do the little child double div tag under that. And so my idea for styling it was that I was going to be able to use part of the styling for the parent block and then do the ninth, that whatever ninth child for the second section of it. But I was
Okay.
like, I really think I'm thinking about this structurally incorrect. So I was like, huh.
Yeah, that does sound like, and even if I'm not understanding 100%, it does sound a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. Now, of course, it can seem like my method is pretty complicated too, but I still, in fact, let's ignore that red block again. Still, we want to kind of look at as simple as possible. So even though you might be looking at a web layout that maybe has a lot, seems like it might have a lot of blocks. So, yeah, let's look at this one down here in the lower left. I got the yellow, I got the blue, then I got the green and the purple. Okay. So it can be a little bit overwhelming. But what if you looked at it this way? What if it was just two blocks, one big block on the left and one big block on the right?
Okay.
And then you create that layout. And there you go. It's one big block on the left, one big block on the right. Now, once you've got that layout, you think, all right, that wasn't so bad. Now focus all your attention on the one on the left. And there's two blocks in there, a yellow and a blue. One on the left, one on the right. Using the exact same technique you used for getting these two big blocks side by side, you would use this for getting two blocks side by side.
So in that bottom left example, pretty much it would be like creating two containers, but two containers then contain two separate divs inside them. Okay.
That's exactly it. Here, let me do this. I won't do the whole thing here, but, or maybe I will. It's not that tough.
Yeah, I was really lost when we started with the layout thing because I was like, I don't remember how divs are placed and how you, I just didn't understand how they were structured for a sec. I was like, wait, I guess I was thinking about it like which one layers on top of the other because I was like, well, wait, doesn't a div just become the whole page in a sense? So I was like, how do I present
Yeah, instead of thinking of it as what's on top of the other, think of it as what is inside or within the other. So with this lower left layout, I'm going to create two blocks that are side by side. Okay, so class equals the big left. Oops, I don't even need to do that. Well, I guess I can. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so there's my big left. And there's the big right. And so what I would do there is I would just create two big blocks side by side, taking 50% and 50%, just like we did before. All right, great. Well, the big left has two blocks of itself. Div class equals BL for big left, BL left. And div class equals BL right for big left right. So that one on the left has two divs within it. And there it is. It's the gold one and that blue one. But then again, the same thing for this one over here on the right. It's got div class equals BR for big right top. Div class equals BR. Because the one on the right has the green on the top and the purple on the bottom. That would be the HTML for that particular layout.
Okay, I think I'm kind of getting a little bit there.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you want to work on this one, and I've got a advising appointment like later on at 6 o'clock at my on my Zoom office. So I'm going to be on the computer around that time. So if this is something you tackle this afternoon, maybe get in touch with me, you know, around 6:30 or something like that, or 6:15 or 5 or whatever, sometime. And we can see how it's looking.
Okay, and then just for like a little, then just the other thing is then in this scenario, the things required to style the parent, like big left or big right, pretty much you just need to create the space for those, right? You don't actually need to determine the flex properties, I suppose, of those, right?
Well, no, not necessarily, because big left does need to be about 50% wide because it's taking up half the screen. Big right needs to be 50% wide because it's taking up half the screen. They need height of 100 VHs, you know, so they do have height, they do have width, even though they've got kids. Now, it is true, once you size the kids, that would force the sizing of the parent. However, I advise you to style and structure the parents before you even get to the kids.
Okay. So just to kind of make sure that whatever
that's
is
right. So if
created
you were
from-
working on this one, before you even put those little inner divs in there, I would just style that. Big block on the left, big block on the right.
So kind of just like that previous model with just the two separate side ones, just get the colors
Exactly.
presented correctly on those.
That's exactly it. When I was sketching these up, that's all I was doing. I mean, it's not like these are 18 completely unique layouts. It's maybe 6 unique layouts. So it's all right. Well, there's 2 blocks, big blocks side by side. If you can do that, then tack on that little red thing. Cool. If you can do that 2 big blocks on the side, put that red thing in just the blue. If you can tackle those 2 big blocks side by side, split each of them up so that they have their own little blocks. You know,
gotcha.
So it's the same, yeah, just the same thing, just with more stuff thrown in.
Yeah, I definitely was overcomplicating it because I was like trying to kind of run off course without following along and kind of try it on my own. And then I was like, this is looking really weird. And then the one thing I was having an issue with was, I think it was layout 3 or 4 where we had the ball. We did the red ball in the page. And so one of the problems I kept having is the ball wasn't staying on the top left corner. It was attaching to the body of the page, so it would go all the way down to the bottom left, even though I hadn't moved it too much. But
yeah. So I think here's what, and it was my layout 2. So if you look at my layout 2, you'll see it on there. But basically that logo, that round ball, it's inside of my top bar. Cool. Okay. But here's the key thing that's easy to forget. The top bar, the thing that contains that positioned element, has that position relative.
Okay, and then with position, pretty much relative and absolute are always used in conjunction, right?
Exactly.
You don't have a relative without an absolute, and you don't have an absolute without a relative, right?
Sometimes you do, but for the most part, that's what it's
That's the, okay.
yeah,
General
yeah,
gist. Gotcha.
yeah. There are some times when we use position relative by itself. In fact, I did it on Thursday's class. I used position relative by itself in order to create a little effect when I clicked on a button. I may have done it at the end of class though.
Oh, the
Um,
shadowing. Yeah, to
that's
create
right.
that that
The little
that
shadow effect.
action
So,
shadow effect.
yeah, so
Right.
that was a little position relative there by itself. Rarely will you use position absolute by itself. Almost always, if you're using position absolute, the parent is going to have position relative.
Gotcha. I think I'll have to look at W3 for more examples of that
Yep.
too, because
Yep. More
that's a weird
examples.
one.
And don't forget to where's my Blackboard? Is it still open? Yes, it is. There's Blackboard. In our resources, there's a bunch of videos. And I've got a couple of videos about absolute positioning web page elements in there. Okay. So,
Gotcha.
so definitely start getting into these week 6 resources. There's a ton of them, but most of the videos are relatively short. Okay. And
Okay.
those are going to rehash some things you saw, and they're going to go over some things that you necessarily didn't see. So,
And then just for the participation, I did, I think, 6 of the layouts, but I all made individual HTMLs for them, which I don't think was the best idea. But now
no,
I'm going back to my index and I'm thinking, I don't,
you made individual hyperlinks to them. You mean?
no, like I just made individual the layouts. So I'm trying to figure, I was trying to remember how I would go into my index and do it like you did, where you just made a single page that then opens up with the opportunity to
Yeah.
link you to all the other layouts.
Got it. So you might be able to see this, but all of my little layout pages are called like layout 1, layout 2, 3, 4, 5, layout 6, you know.
Mhm.
So those are the names there. But I do have that one page that I started off at the beginning of class, and it's called web layouts. My web layouts contains hyperlinks to those other pages.
Oh, okay. I made a big dumb move and made the name of that layout 1. So I was like, oh, wait, this isn't.
Okay. So what you could do is you could rename that web page and maybe call it layout index or layout home or something like that.
Gotcha. And then that makes it simple because then I can just index, I can just link to the web layouts, which will then link to the rest of the layouts for the participation, right? Gotcha. Okay, sweet. Well, thank you so much, Ralph.
Cool. If you don't mind, before you head off, I had my recorder on, and I would like to keep that as part of the class, unless our discussion, unless you have an objection to it.
No, that's no problem with me.
Cool, great. Yeah, because I think you have some good questions, and I think other people are going to have the same question. So
yeah, I definitely get lost in some of this stuff.
yeah.
So if someone else has a similar question and it helps them out too, then heck yeah, keep it on the recorder.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Sweet. All right, we'll talk to you soon, Ralph.
Bye.